Thank you everybody for joining. It's again, I would say, that time of the year when we get together, exchange a couple of ideas, share a couple of insights, thoughts, perspectives via chat, basically, and then see what we can learn from each other. That's predominantly the basis of what we are doing right now. So before we go with our let's lineup of speakers, we have four distinct kind of and story narratives here, speakers as such, and we will go into details with each one of them. Couple of things we just want to start with is understanding where we are right now. Right, we are literally in the midst of massive change, and there is a love and hate relationship with right now what's happening. Hate for all the obvious reasons. We are still in the continuation of 2020. Nothing has specifically changed in the last 2 months or 1.5 months. And we all know what we hate right now from 2020, COVID or otherwise. But from the love perspective, let's try to see why we should be appreciating what we are or what we are handed with. Right now, as the designers or designer community or all of us on this platform who are forward-minded thinkers, businessmen, strategists, researchers, this is a unique opportunity to literally dig down our heels and try to go to the deep minds of, I would say, corners of your mind to extract whatever you have learned, kept, stored to utilize right now. It is really a radical change happening everywhere, and that's where we have to start to think about the age-old maxim. Design should not be used as an insurance. Design should be used as an investment. It will always be a perpetual investment in that. Whatever you can afford from your R&D, it can be 8%, 10, 12%, goes back again into design to keep on innovating. And somehow, those of us who are invested into that can take on these blows of this economic change. And those are right now who are coming towards design saying like, let's see how it can help us. It will still help you, but it might take a decent kind of a lag time to bring it on as such. So making sure how we are looking at this new element. See, when we say design, most people, or let's say decent factor of people, think only of problem solving or problem analysis. That is one part of design, but the other part of design, more heavier so, is opportunity assessment. Okay, what are these other shifting tectonic plates are moving about? What is this exposed, let's say, white uncontested market space that we are handed over with, where everybody has the same start line? It's not that somebody else has an advantage over you. No, it has happened right now. It has changed right now. How are we trying to make sure we utilize the tools of design research to extract those changing sentiments? Those sensibilities are changing, the value structures are changing, we are in the midst of it. How to make sure we immediately translate them, identify them, rightly connect them, and transfer them into the world of design to make sure whatever we are doing, a product, an implement, a widget, a gadget, an UI, would eventually benefit people for their betterment, of their way of living, and also put some beauty into it. There is, you cannot literally delineate beauty and efficiency and functionality is all composed together as a single molecule. These are just different atoms randomly going around. And the reason is, even though today we are starting with, let's say, mobility or the new mobility, and we'll try to see what this mobility is versus automotive or transportation or any other elements we want to call it. But main element we want to really make sure is we understand and grapple and use it or leverage is no single product can be designed in isolation. That also is applicable for the domains. So when we say, let's say, mobility, how it has to influence or get its tentacles aligned with these other domains of industry. It might be consumers, it might be hotel industry, it might be retail industry, it might be outdoor industry. How to understand that kind of an give and take relationship, not just with the product, but at the abstract level or the super level of how the domain is going to interacting with, because more and more whatever we do is making sure people are going to be, I would say, experiencing the ecosystem experience rather than just a single product experience. And that's where the fun comes in, is how you cross reference, cross pollinate these behavior changes. Behaviors will always be changing. Some habits need time to change. Some habits, as we are in the midst of it, have to change overnight because it just forced down upon us. And we have changed a little bit, pretty nicely to some of them. But how to make sure we understand them and create this newer kind of, and I would say, products and solutions and services to go and make still life a little bit better. So apart from the broader spect of it, we'll try to today a little bit more focus on the mobility as such. But the main thing is, you might be a designer, it might be an internal design studio or an external design studio like us. You might be to a small, medium, large firm. This is the time to really invest not just money, but time and burden into design to make sure eventually is going to pay you back full steam in the economic return as such. That's, let's say, a preamble of typically what we do or what we are observing. By the way, it's an amazing thing to be a design studio. There are so many things changing for a good reason too, is because we, not just we, and when I say we, as a humanity, we are all questioning anything and everything. Means seriously, we are all doing that. And then it comes to the business sense and the business planning of it. Like, are we really in the right business? Is a business, I would say, the ground before below us is shifting, and how we might to pivot for it as a part of the business model. And the good part of it is there are so many open opportunities, and we are right now trying to talk with so many, I would say, different, I would say, range of people who want to go and add their own, I would say, expertise and experience to this newer world. It might be an inventor, it might be a startup, you might be stage A or stage B startup. If you're doing something that's going to genuinely change people's lives for better, then making sure you're not forgetting about the the bare tenets of industrial design. And that is not just beauty. I think we all here know it or should be knowing it. It starts in the world of usefulness and usability, and then the human factors and economics, and then making sure the entire package is wrapped into a in aesthetical architecture, beauty being a slice of it. And eventually, as we go along and talk with our four people, speakers, 4 hours, four insights, these things will start to exude out. So today we have four speakers. We'll be starting with John, sir. We are going to start way beyond. Maybe we will go to the future to ask questions. Maybe we'll come right now. Maybe we'll go back 4.5 billion years ago to see how we all started. So we'll try to make the first thing really trying to open our minds, trying to understand the purpose, the meaning about uniqueness and compelling. That happens, that we can do it. But where are we and how we are going to ask questions? We'll go and start with that kind of factors. Next is going to be Parish. We'll be talking about mobility. He will be exposing us to this newer ventures he is doing, predominantly in the world of outdoors and recreational and literally being in the call of the outdoors kind of a perspective. We will spend some time over there. Then we have Pat Schiavone. He was earlier with Ford, and he knows, I would say, more about muscle cars and truck kind of a culture of the Americana like nobody else. So we'll start with that kind of an element of what made cars really passionate and to love about, and then trying to literally zoom to right now or maybe a few years later to see how that is going to be retained or not. And then lastly, we will close up with Dave Byron. Predominantly, he will be speaking it from the world of not just driver centricity, but typically the elements of how we want to focus on the user. And here it's going to be a design occupant and how to keep that fiercely in mind and design this enclosure, this moving enclosure going from A to B accordingly. So four distinct kind of vectors, and let's see at the end how we can all bring it together. Feel free to keep on putting your questions in the chat. Lanea will try to monitor that and send it to me. We already have decent questions from almost, not all of you, but most of you. When we are RSVPing, you had an option to put some questions for our panelists over here. So we'll try to make sure we'll go over to them also. So having said that, I think let's open the curtains. John, you want to hide? Yes, there you are. Welcome, John, to the panel. How are you doing?
I'm great, Jiva. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure, and I think it's everybody's pleasure that you found time in your jam-packed schedule to spend some of your nuggets of wisdom with us. By the way, for people in the audience who might not be knowing John, which is very difficult to believe right now, but he is a quintessential enlightened mind. Means a doctor from Stanford, kind of in mind, but also coming back to the roots of fundamental level of who we are as humans. Are we talking about user-centric design? Are we talking about human-centric design? Or John, as you, I think we're going to talk about should we now focus on humanity-centric design, where it's not just a person who's going to buy your product or services, but how it is going to affect the sociology, the social culture, the cultural elements as such. So we just love those kind of deep philosophical discussions with you. So thanks for your time. By the way, that's a beautiful painting on your right. What is that?
It's a picture of a sequoia. I think I'm not sure which one. Is probably in one of the national parks in California, and it was such an amazing picture that they have the whole height, and I thought it was neat. So I just had it laminated and made a poster. Given that we're working from home these days, just having just interesting things to look at in the room, like your room, Jiwa.
No,
Just makes the day a little bit better that
I
way.
have a vertical structure, but that is completely man-made, which is still shorter than those trees, the giants over there. I think. So I came here to the US 19 years ago. The first year, me and my wife chose to go was to go to National Park Services and just get blown away by
Yeah.
the giant reds over there. And I have been a follower of John Muir and those elements, and it's something. Means I think you also would attest to this when people give the example, some of the greatest strategies that anybody has done, means yeah, there are strategies from Amazon and Walmart and all those things that we hear from HBR. But I think just the creation of the National Park Services, one of the simply most strategic virtue to go and add with to protect these spaces and monuments and trying to make sure we are saving them for the posterity, and that is an uh, I was on a statue, a monument for that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you're also in the similar domain of thinking structure.
You're right, right. In the national parks, as you know, this, especially during the last year or so, has been a place of refuge for a lot of people to go to see these places because they couldn't go to, a typical amusement area or recreation area, but going to national park has, I think, been a great relief to many people over the last year and
Yeah,
then some.
you are absolutely right. Means last year or this year also, we have only so many less things to do. Getting in the vehicle and going
Yeah,
out of the outdoors means I think Jeep and some of these, I would say, 4x4 vehicles had the highest number of sales because people were trapped in their houses and they had to just go out, and canoe
yeah,
sales and stand-up paddle boarding sales and all this just rocketed, including a trampoline sale. Now also you can't buy a trampoline. I need to sell mine in the black market and get some good money for it. I think we can start anywhere, and eventually, for our audiences, we might come back. You might have seen last week we had this amazing mission from mankind to go and land on Mars, the Perseverance. That
yeah,
itself was an fantastic achievement. Means yeah, in 1969 this went to moon and landed, but now we have something which is going to extract rock, soil, and samples and keep it with it. So the next mission it will go and pick it up. So that's something huge, and eventually we will try to see how you are trying to help push that kind of a mental boundary level to reach out to over and beyond. But
yeah,
I think let's start something to the coreness of humanity. I think we always talk about humans, and one virtue that separates us from everybody is our willing of exploration. We have always kept on
yeah,
exploring. That means from, let's say, not from just Africa to all over the world, but Europe to over here, Magellans and the Lewis and Clark expeditions. Somebody has to go out there on this thin kind of and stretched lines, mark out something, lay out something, get some I would say vision beyond the horizon, and then come back and then let other industries or enterprises or entrepreneurs go and in the chartered land. What do you think about this basic earnest element of human exploration? And eventually I know you're going to we'll bring it out to the world of mobility, but any thoughts over there?
yeah. My general thought is, looking at the way humans have, you know, traveled and really populated the whole planet, is a remarkable thing. If let's say that, the evidence suggests that humans, Homo sapiens originated in East Africa, right, and then traveled throughout the world and populated everything. Um, I think there's something about the way we're made that has an innate curiosity. For me, it's a curiosity, right? Um, that is part of that. I think there's other factors too, economics, if you will, and livelihoods and so on. But I think, if you're not curious, then you don't venture out the door, right? And then as human history, and then today as innovators and inventors, designers and artists and so on, I think that's really important, and we need to continue to do that and use our imaginations for both physical and virtual, and whether exploration is literal or figurative, right? I think it's very important that we continue to do that.
So basically, when we came to the oceans, we invented ships or floating vessels to go beyond that,
Right.
right? Means we were not thinking of a ship as we were exploring. We came to a threshold where there is no land here. There is something here called liquid or water, and let's try to see how we go beyond. And okay, wind is here. I can do some oars, and I can go beyond over there. A similar element will go to the third medium, right? Means in a way we are going now beyond the space, or eventually I do not know. Talking about interstellar is going to be a long shot, but when you talk about these kind of an horizons, means right now we all know what a horizon is based on, let's say, our curvature of earth. But when you talk about new horizons or new horizon studio, and especially with the work you are doing with Tiger, Elevate, or Loop, what is that horizon for you, or how are you going to redefine this element called horizons?
Yeah. So I think where I begin is um, I'll actually I'll reference a book I recently read. It's actually, the name of the book is called actually Horizon. It's written by Barry Lopez, and in one of the things that, I mean, it was a very interesting book, because first of all, I thought the book would be about just travel and his travels, but it ended up being about reflecting about when he goes to different places, understanding the history of that place. He reflects about the human situation today. And one of the interesting things he had written about was studying the people the Thule people who lived up in northern Canada, in near just west of Greenland. And he was saying, the Thule people migrated there from Alaska, to search new food, and they're sort of traveling first represented a barrier, right? If there's a water barrier, there's an ice barrier, there's a snow barrier, there's a food barrier, but it eventually became, in his words, a beckoning horizon, right? That would kind of drew them into a new place to look at things, and to then expand, for them what could be possible. And when I think about and then he kind of went on to say that, so in addition to that, there are today for us, different types of barriers that are emerging, that are present, things like global climate change, the pandemic, um, social economic issues, racial issues, political division, et cetera, that make that seem to present barriers, right, to our future progress. And one reaction to a barrier could be one to sort of hunker down, right, and to get into a mode of kind of like protectionism, I suppose. But then he was saying, how can we rethink that into like a new horizon, a beckoning horizon, to go beyond the things that threaten us today. And so for me is how do we use our imaginations and our ability to think about these things in a way that, on the one hand, could be cause for despair, but on the other hand, it could be a great motivating force, if you will, to well, you move into go to someplace else, right?
So when you say but that is a we can try to talk a little bit more or distangle this element of barrier, because it can be barriers like a pandemic, barriers of exploration. Eventually, we can come down to the barriers of innovation also. But beyond this barrier, I mean, what do you think might be calling us from beyond the barrier for our kind of an curiosity
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah, so recently I've been thinking about that, and for me, quite simply, is for me right now, it's the future generations, right? The unborn. I guess the recently born, who can't literally can't talk yet, right?
Yeah.
If you have a baby, right? To the unborn, right? And just like us, we look back, right? We look back at, you know, good times and bad. We look at the founding of the United States and the remarkable achievement of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, the Constitution that really we hold dearly, in this country, and marvel at that, right? And for me, it's like, what is that future generation? What are they saying, right? And I really do think that we can hear them. It's and I think the reason why we can hear them because they're us. They're humans, right? It's not an alien species. These people will share a heritage that we all have, and so for me that is, asking ourselves, what are they saying, right? And trying to imagine that, and then use that as I'm a fan of these sci-fi movies, like, Avengers Endgame, that sort of thing. You kind of have this future,
And the
right?
dune that's behind you.
Right. And so how do we, um, you know, imagining this travel in time, if you will, and to see what they would say, and then use that, to reflect, right? And to, imagine what kind of future do we have, and what kind of future are we going towards, right? And I think that's something we need to be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Means what you say, well, it's amazing kind of an tilt to this about understanding or anticipating the needs of this uh, unborn or the babies and the infants that we have, and providing them a better, cleaner, greener future.
Yeah.
That made me just
And,
realize. Go ahead, please.
and I don't think it's that hard to imagine, because if any of them, like, on callers are from Texas, and I definitely, I hope you're well. That's a good example, right? Because it's sort of like, you know to winterize a power facility is within the realm of imagination, right? Easy imagination, I think, right? And forgive me if I'm misspeaking, because I'm not in the power industry. Um, but that's an example, right? It's like, why don't we prepare for that better, right? And maybe I'm picking on Texas unfairly, but there's a lot of other things that we can preparing for, right? And that's what I kind of mean, right? We need to be doing that and doing it better, and otherwise, uh, because of global climate change, that just becomes common, or more, a higher likely scenario, right? And it's things like that when you look at it, just like, we don't have that was not an outcome that was necessary, right? Because people in Michigan live in colder weather than Texas, and you're fine, right?
Yeah,
You don't have a you don't break down, and, like, so what happened, right?
absolutely. That itself is a means it was not a pandemic. Means pandemic, nobody was prepared. But over here we have one resilient kind of an state, uh, and suddenly a small fluctuation in the weather. It was not long sustained also, but literally crippled the entire state to a grinding halt with so much loss of property and lives to its. You're really right. Means in the way I'm in Michigan, we are ready for this. Sometimes it's hard to imagine. Also, like what? Like how did that happen? I was explaining that to my kids. They are pretty young, and they could not understand that because they had never seen what might happen when you have so much snow load on your roof and roof just cave in. It's sometimes as simple elements like that. But going back to the earlier one about, you're right. Sometimes it might not be hard to imagine or anticipate what, let's say, our newer generation or the babies would born. But that reminded me of another. I would say I'm going to paraphrase his quote. I think it was Richard Dawkins, where he always said that we are also now molded by the hands of our ancestors through our genetic code, the way we have in a way evolved to understand what's happening. So I think going forward also is as essential as trying to see how we have been coded to react to the things. And I think the examples you gave was like, let's say in the savannah, if you are a deer, then the deer has a genetic code of trying to see how they have to, let's say, drink water, look here and there, run away from a lion, and just make sure they are always surviving. So there are ecosystem forces around, including the lions or other predators there, which help let them know instinctually, hardwired reptilian brain when to bolt out. But the same ecosystem, hardwired, trains a baby cub of a lion to its genetic code to see now how they want to go and catch those elements. So that kind of an, I would say, coding is already there, maybe in us as humans too. Because as you're saying about the curiosity, the yearn of going beyond the barrier, trying to see what is over there. It might be fear or despair on the side what's happening, but then it might be some people might say it's greed or trying to understand just the curiousness about what's happening over there. So I think the future and the past somehow would be or should are connected in what we are discussing about.
Yeah, and we should use that curiosity drive to imagine a better future, and from imagination to innovation, right? And I think a lot of community here about the design of that, so it's there's a lot to be um concerned about for sure. But yeah, we need to use that curiosity, which the same curiosity which we use for exploration, I think, is the same thing that drives innovation too, right? And then we need to be keeping it up, right? And
Yes, trying
keep
to
on
keep with
keep on fighting for that. Yeah.
yeah, trying to keep with the topic of the barriers. We talked about barriers of, let's say, exploration, barriers of let's say this major big hairy audacious problems of climate change or pandemic. Just for a moment coming down on earth, what might be the barriers of innovation from your perspective? As you are an innovator yourself, you are representing an innovative company. What do you
Yeah.
think typically for people would be hard to do? Because somehow people who have, let's say, been beyond the barrier, they say like, dang, I should have done this before. What might be those some of the handful barriers of innovation for
Yeah.
audience to
I
understand?
think um I think one thing might be empathy, and the role of, and specifically the role of empathy in corporate life and in public life. And I think empathy is something that, again, people here on the call are very familiar with, right? It's something that either we teach or that we've learned and that we employ in our craft, right? But when you look at, or when I look at, maybe just speaking for myself, the broader world, how does that square up, right, with the reality of stuff, right? I mean, um, as an American, I look at the political situation and it's like, why does it seem so like bipolar, right? Or yeah, I don't know if that's the right term, but you know,
Let's say
um,
dual-minded.
yeah, we get to a point where like, well, it's like, just because you're this, then I don't think that, right? I'm like, okay, I guess, right? And that is a counter to what we learn and teach about empathy, right? Being in another person's shoes, understanding their viewpoint, their perspective, their drives, their motives, their values, right? And in the political, at least the political world, we seem so far away from that, right? And so empathy right now is, okay, designer, you do your empathy thing and talk about empathy and have at it, but the rest of us are like, well, what, who cares about empathy, right? Kind of, I don't, if I have empathy, I'm going to appear weak, right? So I'm going to have empathy for you. um so I think, to the extent that my concern is that what we have in our political realm in this country right now is counter to what it is, using empathy, right? And we talk about empathy as being a powerful tool to really understand the customer and design right, and et cetera, right? But the reality is it's not something. And then in the corporate world, right, where profit and uh, intellectual property and the control of markets and competitive advantage, how does empathy score up with that, right? And they, corporate executive might say, well, empathy is just going to help us be more competitive and to make more profit and to, et cetera. So I'm like, huh, okay. So it's that to me is the barrier. What is the role of empathy? Because if it's such a good thing, then why is it just left in the realm? And I'm being extreme here to some degree. I understand that, but nonetheless, it's an observation, right? When you ask them the question, and I think that's sort of like, it's hard to square up sometimes the things that I'm taught or try to use and what I see out there in my personal life, or the life of my community, or the life of this country, it's not there's a decohesion or uncohe I don't know what that I don't it's not it's incohesive, right? It's schizophrenic, right? It's insanity. So there you go. That's my reaction to
No,
the
it's.
question.
I was writing down the two, three elements over here. Means empathy is at the core of what we are doing or want to do. Somehow you're right. It gets at one extreme. Let's say it becomes one extreme end of a spectrum where empathy lies, and then the other end of the extreme spectrum would be where, let's say, the business mind, business person, the bean counting people in the corporate hierarchy might like. But literally, and I cannot do that with this, it is literally at the extreme ends of that kind of, and let's say the spectrum. But imagine this kind to be turned around like a bracelet, and they actually come very near to each other in crossing a thin line of how it can be used. It literally reminds me, and I think I would be paraphrasing again a quote of Ayn Rand in her book, The Atlas Shrugged. Richard Haley, the character, says, and this is an amazing quote. I hope I can remember it exactly. If there is more a tragic fool than the businessman who thinks that he himself is not the highest exponent of human creativity, it is the designer who thinks he is his enemy. So basically, the understanding of that is both the creativity or the empathy lies in, let's say, both of the skill sets, but they don't know they are actually at the highest end of the spectrum to use it in an imaginative, innovative, creative kind of a way, because it's there is finally we are making products or let's say services or experiences which people are going to buy or use or share eventually for the betterment of their human condition. And that distinction that, hey, this is cut and dry business world, and this is the insanity creative juicy kind of a world. It's not, it's literally it's not homogeneous, but there is a mixing happening between both of them. And the element you talked about, that word insanity, so I am an industrial designer, but I also John went to Michigan State and did my executive MBA, and I was always curious to ask about why do you think designers are like, yeah, we are just bunch of kids with crayons, and what we do is just silly things. It literally, everybody I talked with, really good corporate people who are savvy, smartness of the world like nobody, but somehow it comes to the world of design, they will, and literally, and this is my data point of one, but actually talk with literally not hundreds, but 100 people, I would say. Most thing happens. This is the first time I'm expressing this. Most of the let's say this is before pandemic times, right? All these kind of meetings and conferences or higher element of cocktail things happen into a nice museum. And where does it happen? In high fine and dine area. What is around in the walls? High art. It is, let's say, these are just representative of the real world. But when you say high art, it predominantly happens to be abstract, and they will see some of the abstract works of Monet and let's say Dali, and this blurred time clocks here and there, and they always think like, what were you smoking to do and sketch out a bull over there? So the way they think is it's just pure artistry. Even though designers are born from the artist, we use the rules of, I would say, proportions and volumes and heft and color and all those things to bring out the empathy. So people will not just buy that truck because it is durable, but because it means something else to them. And that's where the, I would say, bifurcation happens, where they're exposed only to the abstractness of the art world versus the rigors and the functionality or the beautility, I would say, the beautility and utility combined together, which comes into, let's say, the tenets of industrial design. But you are right. It's a pretty big barrier. In any other barriers you might think that we need to talk about, apart from, let's say, understanding empathy?
Yeah, I think the other barrier is sort of these not hard decisions, but I guess they seemingly oppose things like economic viability, like especially in the pandemic. I think the questions have been coming up, and for good reason. The balance between economic viability and human health. To protect human health, we need to be isolated or at least quarantining, and we're getting, but that really impacted economic viability, right? And how do we, and there was definitely one group of people that was opposing the quarantining because it hurt economic viability. And there's another group of people that fought, no, we need to be taking that hit. And I don't think it's an easy answer to that, but it is a tension that exists in our world, right? And then another one is another tension is like, personal rights versus, the good of the community, right? And now we can get into political debate on this one, and that's not my interest, but it's this tension, right? What's my personal rights versus and right to do this and right to do that versus what's the my community obligation, my local community, community to my nation, and the community of the world, right? And that those things are in battle, right? And to if we don't have good debate, and there's debate and there's going to be disagreement, but if we don't get beyond just merely arguing with each other, how are we going to make progress on anything? If we are just hunkered down in our trenches in these areas, right? And that's what I see, and I think that's a problem, and I think we got to figure something out, because
It's
like
100%.
World War One, it doesn't, you don't really resolve anything, just shoot each other, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah, and what you say is really right. Like the first element that you mentioned about the human health and the economic viability for a corporate or a business person to think about. Means there are two words that are coming out pretty strongly amongst many other words. Is first is always the trust factor of why I'm going to buy something from this brand. That just goes uniform, and it depends on how we want to now use that to what we are doing. But the other word that's coming out, top contender, is literally the health, not just the mental health, which is a big thing right now in this, let's say,
Yeah.
the frozen northern part of the USA. It is really a big thing, and some of the elements or suicidal deaths right now happening has in a way, if not skyrocketed, already over there. But the physical health means one thing that COVID has exposed is the fragility of our humans against these things, or let's say the one of the factors might be maybe diabetes or maybe obesity, how they have found these kind of an elements to now think a little bit more hardly on. So health is really a good thing, but I can drive it to the home with the point, like imagine start of last year, John, literally all the world was in hands to go against. We all saw a single viral video of a straw coming out of a turtle, right? It started the movement of how to ban single-use plastic, single-use straws, and everything. We were gung-ho on that. We were talking with plastic manufacturers to now just try to find out a new solution to that. And then just go to mid of last year, the single-use masks and plastics have helped us live as a species. Literally overnight, the meaning changes, the elements just go around from the health perspective to now how what we have to do, not in the thriving world, but in the surviving world. So it really is not that it is good, bad, or otherwise, but this is what
Yeah.
has happened. And we are using those things now literally every day to make sure we are still alive. Means the
Yeah.
production of the packaging things of to go things right now from the restaurants means that it's just saving us in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then, yeah, there's no easy answers. I understand that, right? But just it's this, but we got to have these conversations, right? And it's never just one or the other. And I think that we need to just own up to that, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
I wish our leaders would be more honest about it, right? But
Yes,
they're
and
not.
another element you mentioned, and not to go political about that, about personal rights, and then how much you can divulge so that our community is more safe and happy. And that's a
That's right.
pretty important one where, yeah, if you want to sign up something that you can use my data for something, is going to help, let's say, understand how a pandemic might evolve or grow, or other trying to follow other kind of an elements where everybody is using it for collective betterment. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing thing to see how it can still be not used as one-on-one first party data, but it can be used in aggregate and collective elements of what's happening. It might be the flu season coming in, you can actually see the visuals now. The pollens are coming in during the spring, you can see it now based on how we are reporting back to our world. So some of those things would be greatly beneficial for anything and everything. So those are, yeah, I know we came down to the ground, but let's go back again to the horizons, far outlooking kind of an elements. I think we are talking about this single person, you said, of privacy issues, to going to a little bit more bubble or cluster of how we might release it for our community. Let's try to broaden it completely all the way to civilization, from a human to a tribe to eventually civilizations. What does this collective humanity as a civilization bring to us as a human that as a single lone person or a tribeman we could not have?
Wait, could you maybe rephrase that question actually?
Like we were talking about humans, and then our collective, let's say states, or collective community as such. We're talking about civilization, right? Maybe we are getting together, we are building upon each other, we are helping each other in our own trades, so now we are
Yeah.
completely interdependent on each other. But then what does civilization bring to the people that they did
Uh,
not already have?
oh yeah, and that's right. That's the question, right? What does civilization, quote unquote, civilization bring to people that you know don't they already have? And there was my answer will be this book. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a picture book, right? A lot of pictures, and there was a picture. It was on two, I think, facing pages, or maybe it's on one page. One page was in contemporary, you know, Western world, if you will, and there was somebody living in a more rural area in another part of the world. You know, let's say, you know, so another part of the world that's not part of the Western world, right? And in the people in the Western contemporary world, they were standing in line with shopping carts full of stuff, right? Something as seen in the local uh, miners, if you will, you know, at Christmas time, right? And nobody's face was smiling. They're all like looking really sad. Just like when you like, I go to a grocery store and we stand in line, we're not really that happy, right? But the people that were, like having a home heated with stoves and it was crowded, they were all smiling, right? And I looked at that and I go, who knows how it was staged and whatnot. And I get it, but I think the point of that, sort of what the editor was trying to show is that happiness is not necessarily how big your basket is, right? It has a lot to do with, are you being loved? Are you loved, right? Are you contributing to your community? Do you have people that you trust and they trust you? Um, and so what does civilization have to do with that, right? Because that existed at the dawn of human civilization, or humans, right? I'm guessing. I don't know. There's no story about that right back a long time ago. But I think that's what I got out of it, right? And so why do we impose civilization on people when they don't? Why do we say it's better, right? And there's a lot we can get, just beyond this conversation about what happened to a lot of the quote unquote indigenous populations across the world, where we are imposing civilization on people, and and today we call it technology, right? And then technology does this, technology does that, and I think, well, let's make sure we're um, yielding this powerful tool in the appropriate way, right? And not necessarily imposing one way or the other, right? And but it is a powerful draw, right? And certainly we celebrate those that are atop of the technology heap these days, right? And we pay attention to every tweet they say or not say or whatever, right? And it's an allure, and so it's become, I think we need to just be sober about it, right? And why did we ruin collectively so many people, eradicated civilization, other civilizations, right? In the, I guess, the guise of better, right? Better technology, right? Again, as purveyors of the creators of new technology, we need to just be honest about that, I think, right?
That's pretty deep, because yeah, I mean, talking about civilizations formed, they are formed by coalescing other kingdoms or civilizations together, or defeating them, and then the winner writes the story. And most of them also were fought with the latest technology at that time. So you're right. It's right now with we are using this powerful technology. It might be AI, it might be walking vehicles, it might be flying drones. Uh, Pretty soon, how we are going to use it eventually for the betterment of one and all. He or she may be not your direct buyer, and that's the main element of how it falls beyond just who is our member versus the membership is the entire 8 billion population at large as such. So
Yeah.
so the time talking about civilizations right now, trying to go a little bit to the future, what sort of future can we expect to see or never to see? Means either or. What should we all be hoping for, and what should be at least deciding collectively in like this is
Ooh.
not what we should be doing. Any thoughts over there?
Yeah, I think if we don't achieve some, is like an earlier point about, I say, economic viability and human health I mean, I think if we don't achieve some sort of measured balance on that, and I think the pandemic is certainly testing us all together on that one. We could expect to see a very just rough life, overall, and just disparities between those who are privileged, and I'm certainly among the privileged, in this world. My life hasn't really been, it's been good, right? But certainly if you're not privileged, and it's not so good, right? And until we find a way to get better balance, you know then we have these gaps, and they could widen, and I don't think that's good. So I hope we could see a future that these gaps get narrowed, for one thing. Otherwise, the gaps widen, and when gaps widen, human history tells us that's not good, right? You get all kinds of turmoil as a result. Um, um, yeah, and that's probably the big one that's sort of, I think, a lot of people's mind, at the moment, and so um, if we don't find a way to help, the economics, and the human health, and we a lot of things that I think are exciting, when let's say, as I mentioned at the beginning, Giovanni, about the Perseverance lander. There's such a juxtaposition, right? And the same thing ironically happened in 1969 when the Apollo missions landed. You had a lot of civil rights issues, obviously, at the time in America. And then today it wasn't, we had the same thing, right? And so I'm like, are we always going to be like this? And I hope that we can find a way forward, that we don't have to uh, be apologizing maybe for going to the Mars, or wherever, if we can't fix education, healthcare, and so on. So I don't know is an answer, I guess I could say, but we got a lot of work to do, and
It's amazing, as you said. Yeah, those were the 60s, 68 the assassination, and then 69 man landing on moon. It's kind of, if you just go to the abstract level, it's kind of replicating the similar thing about what we are doing right now with this reach for going beyond. And the other element of, or let's say, the virtue of it, which is going over there, pushes our technology, not the entire one we are using, but a few fraction of the percentage, to test out things and then bring back the results over here to be used on Earth eventually for education, or for basic health, or for vaccinations, and elements thereof. Trying trying to means I'm trying to share a screen over here, because you mentioned the Perseverance as such. This is not the Perseverance. This is the Tiger that was unveiled
yeah.
last week from your team. By the way, once again, congratulations
Oh,
on
thank you.
taking this where no man has gone before. And I think the audience knows this. Everybody, I think, should be having understood this, or actually read through it. But it's not, I think, as you're saying, it's not just going out and beyond. It's also going back to the natural habitats that we have, right? Means trying to understand the flora and fauna. Means one of the applications of this is, apart from Mars and beyond, where we can literally send this autonomous driving walking vehicles where they can safely go without creating any huge footprint in the natural areas, indigenous tribe areas, areas that we want to just go observe and see and report back and saying what are those triggers that we have to follow in the let's say the ecosystem to see any signs of weather change or other things over there. So even though you're using the technology, it's can be used similarly beyond the earth or right here in the earth, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I hope that in addition to some of these shot photos that you see here, but it would be useful in um, things like you know disaster and emergency management, and also other humanitarian efforts on relief and recovery from disasters, and that's something that I'm really hoping for, because when you have having a vehicle that can go anywhere that humans can, I think could be really important. And so some of the imagery that has been produced about not only this, but the other prior concept called Elevate, we've kind of talked, had shown pictures of that too. And so um, that's something that I hope we can do with product versions of these concepts.
So again, a question not only from me but our audience is this: like I think a few years ago we had the Loop, then a couple of years ago we had the Elevate, now we have the Tiger. These are such an amazing body of work coming out from your group, from Hyundai, and means it's really amazing projects. And by the way, as full disclaimer, means we are involved with you working on that. They are obviously glorious. How do as a leader from the industry to other leaders on our call in the industry, what ammunition did you use to create projects like this to make sure they are sponsored or supported, and so these other companies or other let's say people out there, they might be in mobility, they might be in medical, they might be in consumer products, how they can propose such big, hairy, audacious projects to start within the company? What were the things that you used, or what were the things that you had to overcome the barriers to sell a project like this?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I feel like I didn't have any barriers at all. Maybe I did, but it was so much fun. I had so much fun doing these. I did, I didn't, I can't actually, maybe because my memory, right? I can't remember what the difficult, I'm sure I had difficulties, but I can't remember them. I'm not trying to be, cliche, but I really can't. But I think the main thing though, in all seriousness though, is the importance of having an executive sponsor, somebody of higher rank, I suppose, or which translates to budget approval kind of thing, right? In the corporate life,
Always.
having somebody to back you. And I've been really fortunate to have somebody since really day one at Hyundai to be the sponsor for this activity, and that having somebody like that in your corner is everything. It just gave me the confidence to kind of get through all of this stuff, and really valuable. So I wish, and for all of you, that you would find that person, right, to be your champion for a long, for a good amount of time, that sponsor plus time, right, really, really important. And then with that, everything else, the rest is history, I guess you could say, right? I like to say, yeah.
The rest is history. Absolutely, absolutely true. So, not that you can talk about this, but then what are you going to work on next? How does your, I know you do some amazing leapfrog jumps from project to project. What might be some of the elements? It might not be on Mars. It might be right here. It might be just downtown street.
Yeah,
What's next in your mind? What should we, again, not just, sorry, not just from John Sir or Hyundai, what should be some of these things on our minds, or folks on the things to see like, dang, I will go and take this and I want to solve this. What might be some other list of things that you cannot do that other people can try to?
yeah, you know, uh, maybe getting specifics, the one that, just as comes to my mind is, the problem of persistent CO2 in the atmosphere. Even if we were to turn off, or negate, get to carbon neutral, or even carbon negative economy, you still got a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere that lasts for a very long time, hundreds, maybe thousands of years. So the impact of that is going to be with us for generations. And if we could extract it, if we can mine, if you will, a new type of mining technology called mining CO2, would be great, to have. And I know there's all kinds of things that, speaking of barriers, right, are just in the way of that. I feel like that's a really important thing to get a handle on. And it's the rich countries, and okay, United States is we're a rich country, right? We, I believe, have a moral responsibility to work on this, right? I don't think you can ask a country that's in the bottom, quadrant, if you will, of economics you can't ask them to solve it. That's ridiculous. That's stupid, right? So we, as a rich country with a lot of smart people, right? Let's get on it, right? What's holding us back? Let's do it, right? That's what I would say.
I like that call to action. What's holding us back? There should be nothing holding us back. If
Right.
both elements are there, extreme abundance of smart people and extreme, I would say, and then a decent kind of a monetary backing to create those kind of an elements. One thing, and I'm not brown nosing here, folks, is as I'm talking with you, your mind is always way out there, and it reminds me of you of Isaac Asimov. He was an amazing futurist, one of the most prolific writers ever. Nobody has
Yeah,
written
right.
books more than him. But he always used to say, think about a product that's going to be 500 years beyond. Like not 50, not 25, not 100, 500. And it's a big time, but you really try to imagine the scenario ecosystem around and then immerse the product so high over there. Then you try to make sure, oh my God, till that time, as you said, there might be persistency of CO2 in the air. Dang, we cannot do those things. Like if we are going to go with space launch vehicles, and now around the earth we have this debris of spanners and nuts and bolts, are we creating a barrier just flying off our shuttles over there? So thinking way beyond
Right.
sometimes helps a lot in doing this. I would, let's say, uh, concepts or scenarios, and then that helps us bring it back to home. Okay, right here, right now, we have to take this step, a small angle change over here, but after that particular time, we know we will be in the hopefully the right trajectory. And that's not an easy task. So I know I have
No.
to let you
No.
go. We are almost at the time, but maybe one or two questions at least.
Okay.
This thinking is amazing. What do you means? Where do you get your inspiration? I am serious. Yes,
Uh,
what inspires you?
I don't know, actually. I guess I have an active imagination, like a lot of us. We have an active imagination. I've just been gifted with that, and like I'm sure a lot of us on this call have an active imagination. That's why we're here, and so I recognize that, and I think that's, I guess, the thing. I don't know. We don't know exactly how I came to be, right? But we all have to recognize what talents we have, and then we need to embrace those gifts, whatever they are, and then give back to the world. Okay. And I know we have to make money, we have to pay the bills, and I get it, I get kids, and I have kids in college, and all that stuff. But by gosh, that's whatever gift is your gift, just use it. And I don't know exactly where it comes from, but is for you to develop and to use, right? And now more than ever, we have to, as those of us in this innovation and creative field.
I like that. You said something that Kurt Bailey always said. Every day is a gift. Means we are literally at the spearhead of this evolutionary chain, right? Means in a way we have been 4.5 billion years in making, from single cell till multi cells till let's say the primates, and eventually right now. And means we are just lucky that none of our ancestors on our both sides have been squashed, devoured,
Right.
accidents happen, nothing. they
Yeah.
all
Right.
survived eventually to produce you, John, or
Yeah,
Jeevan,
and
or
you
Pat,
or Patrick, right?
or Patrick, or Parish. It's in a way, trying to just summarize saying the burden is on us, right? Means in a way we have been, I'm not saying chosen one, but we are right now this kind of an tentacles of this evolutionary bush, and we are at the extreme end of it. And whatever we are going to do right now, especially in this kind of an
Yeah.
resources constrained world, or let's say hunkered down world we are in, is going to be have a huge impact on how we are going to pay for the future. So uh, it's always difficult to let go of any speaker, but I think we are
Thank you.
almost over the
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you very much for your time. Try to feel free to be still
Yeah.
tuned in for as much as time you can with
Okay.
our other speakers. But uh, we will talk soon. I will try to call you
Okay.
tomorrow also. But thank
All
you
right.
again. And if you want to, I think the name of the author is, and maybe Lane already must have sent that. It was Barry Lopez, and the name of
Yeah,
the book
Barry
is
Lopez.
Horizon,
Yeah.
right?
Really enjoyed that book. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Horizon
we will
by
just
Barry
add that in the
Lopez.
chat so that if people want to read about that, they can.
Okay.
But once again, everybody, that's John Sir from Hyundai Motor Group, the creator of Loop, Elevate, Tiger, and I do not know what will be the next one. We are trying to see what it might be. But thank you again.